Let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable to sit with for a second. You know the rules. Save more than you spend, invest early, don't buy things you can't afford. You have probably known these things for years. So why? Genuinely, why is your financial life is not where you want it to be? Because knowing the rule isn't the problem. The problem is that nobody ever told you the rules underneath the rules. The one that actually explains why people who earn good money still end up broke at 60. The one that sit below the surface advice and drive everything else. I found out the hard way. Years in finance, watching people do everything right on paper and still lose. And slowly I started to understand what was really going on. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what this is. 6 rules. And I promise you at least 2 of them are going to reframe how you think about money entirely. For those new here, I'm Muzaffar Teja, qualified accountant, former investment banker, and your guide to cutting through the noise of finance. On this channel, we don't just talk about money. We talk about owning your life. Think personal finance systems, self-development frameworks, wealth building mindsets, and investment strategies that actually work. If that's your vibe, hit subscribe and ring the bell. We drop game-changing content every week. Here is something I learned sitting across from very wealthy people early in my career, and it rattled me because it contradicted everything I had been told growing up. A higher salary doesn't make you wealthy. A higher salary makes you feel wealthy, and those two things are not the same thing. In fact, for most people, a salary increase is the single most reliable trigger for financial stagnation, not growth, stagnation. There is a concept in behavioral economics called hedonic adaptation, and it is one of the most well documented and most ignored findings in the entire field of human psychology. The research behind it was pioneered by psychologist Philip Brickman at Northwestern University back in 1970s. His landmark study compared lottery winners to people who had suffered serious accidents and lost the use of their limbs. What he found shocked the academic world. Within roughly a year, both groups had returned to almost exactly the same baseline level of happiness they had before the life-changing event. The lottery winners weren't significantly happier, the accident victim weren't significantly less happy. Their circumstances had changed dramatically, their internal set point had not. What does that have to do with your salary? Everything. Because what Brickman discovered about happiness applies with almost perfect symmetry to financial behavior. When your income goes up, your brain recalibrates what normal feels like. The flat that used to feel fine suddenly feels cramped. The car you used to love starts looking tired. The holiday you used to take feels basic. You don't decide to upgrade, it just feels like the natural, obvious thing to do. And that upgrade consumes almost exactly the amount your income increased. Your gap, the difference between what you earn and what you spend, barely moves. I remember the moment I first understood this properly. I wasn't sitting in a lecture theater reading about Brickman. I was looking at my own bank statement after a significant pay increase and realizing with genuine confusion that I wasn't saving any more than I had been the year before. More money in, no more money building. I had upgraded everything around me without a single conscious decision. It's not stupidity, it's biology. Your brain is running a program designed for a world where resources were scarce and consuming them immediately was rational. It has no off switch for abundance. The rule then is this: your salary is the starting point, never the destination. The only number that builds wealth is the gap between what arrives and what leaves. And protecting that gap deliberately and systematically is the first thing you need to do before any other rule in this video matters at all. Personal finance as an industry has a spending obsession. Cut the subscription, cancel the gym, make your coffee at home. And look, I'm not dismissing that. There is a version of budgeting that is genuinely important. But I want to put something in front of you that will fundamentally change the maths of how you think about money. Your spending has a floor. There is a number below which you cannot go. You still need to eat, to travel, to live. That floor might be low, but that exists. Your income, however, has no ceiling. None. Not theoretical ceiling, not a practical one. There is no version of the math where you have already earned the maximum possible amount of money available to you. Thomas Stanley and William Donko spent decades studying American millionaires for their book The Millionaire Next Door, published in 1996. It remains one of the most rigorously researched study of wealth accumulation ever conducted. They interviewed over 1,000 millionaires and analyzed the financial behavior that separates those who build significant wealth from those who merely earned high incomes. Their finding was direct. The primary driver of wealth was not extraordinary income, it was the consistent, disciplined gap between income and expenditure, and crucially, the pursuit of income growth as an active, ongoing strategy rather than the passive hope. What that means practically is this: if you spend £2,000 a month, the absolute maximum you can save by cutting is £2,000. That's your ceiling on cost side. But if you spend £2,000 a month and you focus that same energy, same discipline, same hours on developing a skill that makes you more valuable at work, or building a side income, or negotiating a raise you have been avoiding for 18 months, the ceiling on that side of the equation is infinite. Same effort, completely different magnitude of result. The reason most people optimize for the smaller number, the spending side, is that it feels responsible. It feels safe. Cutting back doesn't require you to have a difficult conversation, pitch an idea, put yourself forward, or risk rejection. Earning more does. It requires you to be visible, to claim your value, to step into uncomfortable territory, and that discomfort is exactly why most people avoid it. They choose the tactic that costs them the least emotionally, not the one that pays them most financially. The rule is simple, but the application is not. Spend as much energy optimizing your income as you do monitoring your expenses. Both levers matters, but they are not equal, and treating them as if they were is costing you decades of financial progress. This is the rule nobody talks about, and I think it's the most important one in this entire video. Most financial advice treats wealth building as a knowledge problem. If people just understood compound interest properly, if they knew how to invest, if they had the right information, they would make better decisions. But here is the thing, the information is everywhere. It has never been more accessible, and yet the majority of the people who know exactly what they should be doing financially still aren't doing it. Why? Because the gap isn't a knowledge gap, it is an identity gap. James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, which has sold over 15 million copies and is arguably the most thoroughly researched book on human behavior change published in the last decade, makes a distinction that I want to burn into your mind. He separates outcome-based change from identity-based change. Outcome-based change is when you say, I want to save £1,000 a month. Identity-based change is when you say, I am someone who builds wealth. The same action, completely different psychological engine driving it. Claire draws on decades of habit research, from psychologist B.J. Fogg at Stanford to Charles Duhigg's synthesis of MIT neuroscience, to show that sustainable behavior doesn't come from motivation, willpower, or discipline. It comes from identity. Every action you take is a vote for the person you believe yourself to be. When you save money consistently, you are not just building a balance, you are casting a vote for an identity. When you skip saving because something come up, you are casting a vote for a different identity. The balance doesn't just live in your bank account, it lives in your self-concept. I have seen this play out in my own life in ways that still embarrass me to admit. Early in my career, I had all the right information. I understood the mechanics of wealth, but my identity, the deep, unexamined story I carried about who I was and what kind of person builds serious wealth, wasn't aligned with my behavior. I would read about investing and then not invest. I would plan a saving habit and break it in week 3. Not because I lacked knowledge, because somewhere underneath all the rational thinking was a self-concept that had not been updated. The rule: before you change your financial habits, change the story you tell about yourself. You are not someone who is trying to get better with money. You are someone who builds wealth. That shift sounds small. The behavioral consequences of it are enormous. Most people think about spending as one category. Money goes out. Whether it went on a jacket or a course or a gym membership, it went out. The column in the spreadsheet looks the same, but the financial trajectory those choices create is not even remotely the same. Here is the framework I use, and it changed how I make every single financial decision. Every pound you spend is doing one of two things. It's compounding or it's decaying. There is no middle ground. The car payment is decaying. The moment you drive it, it's worth less. The takeaway is decaying, gone in 20 minutes. The designer item is decaying, but the course that teaches you a skill that earns earns you more money is compounding. The book that changes your thinking is compounding. The coaching session that accelerates your career by 3 years is compounding. The question is never just what does this cost today, it's what does this do to the curve of my financial life over the next decade. The academic grounding for this comes from Robert Kiyosaki's foundational framework in Rich Dad Poor Dad, but more rigorously from economist Gary Becker's Nobel Prize winning theory of human capital, developed at the University of Chicago. Becker's central argument, which took decades to gain mainstream acceptance, was that spending on education, skills, and health is not consumption, it's investment. It produces a return, measurable and compounding, that outperforms most financial instruments available to ordinary people. A skill that increases your earning capacity by £10,000 a year is worth more mathematically than almost any asset you can buy with the cost of acquiring that skill. But here is where most people's thinking on this stops, and where the real cost goes far deeper than anyone calculates. Compounding doesn't only work on the income side, it works on the cost side too, in reverse, and in a way most people never calculate. Every recurring commitment you take on, a car lease, a bigger mortgage, a lifestyle upgrade, doesn't just cost you that amount. It costs you that amount plus every year of future compounding that money could have produced if invested instead. A £50 monthly upgrade to your lifestyle maintained over 20 years doesn't just cost you £12,000. At a 7% average annual return, it costs you closer to £30,000. The decaying spending doesn't just decay in the moment, it compounds downward invisibly over time. The rule: before spending decision, ask yourself one question. In 10 years, will this have compounded up or decaying down? If you can't answer that clearly, it's probably decaying. I want to tell you something about how wealth actually works. Not the version you get in most finance content, but the underlying mechanics that determine why some people build generational money and most people don't. Every pound you have ever earned came from one of two places. Either you traded your time for it or an asset produced it for you. That's the complete list. And the problem with first category, trading time, is a hard mathematical ceiling that nobody acknowledges loudly enough. You have a fixed number of hours. You need some of them to sleep, recover, live. What remains is your working capacity. And no matter how much you optimize that remaining time, you cannot expand it. You are structurally limited. Now here is what changes everything. Robert Kiyosaki in Rich Dad Poor Dad drew a distinction between what he called the employee quadrant and investor quadrant. The employee trades time for money and stops earning the moment they stop working. The investor or asset owner earns while they sleep. The asset produces income independent of their time input. But the concept has even deeper roots. In 1776, Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations described the wealth generating mechanism of capital accumulation, the idea that money deployed into productive assets generate more money without requiring additional labor. Smith wasn't describing a loophole, he was describing a fundamental architecture of how wealth compounds over time. An asset in the truest sense is anything you build or buy once that continues producing income after the initial work is done. A rental property, a dividend paying portfolio, a course you recorded in 2 months that sells for next 5 years, a piece of software, equity in business. The defining characteristics of all of these is the same. The relationship between your time input and your financial output eventually breaks. You stop needing to put more time in to keep getting money out. I built my first income producing asset relatively late because I spent years believing that career progression, climbing the salary ladder was the equivalent. It isn't. A higher salary is a better rate for your time. It is still trading time. The moment you stop working, it stops. An asset doesn't stop. The distinction, which sounds theoretical until you actually feel it, is the difference between financial security and financial freedom. Security means you have enough cushion if something goes wrong. Freedom means your life doesn't depend on whether something goes wrong. The rule: identify one asset you could begin building in the next 30 days. Not a year, not when conditions are perfect, in 30 days. Even if it earns you £50 a month to begin with. You are not building the income yet. You are building the psychological experience of money arriving without you trading time for it. And the experience, once you have it, changes everything about how you think about wealth. The last rule is the one that most people dismiss as motivational fluff. I want to show you why it is. In fact, fact, the most mathematically grounded principle on this entire list. In 2000, economist Arzo Lutmer at Harvard and Andrew Clark at the Paris School of Economics published separate but converging research on what economists call relative income effects. What they found studying tens of thousands of households was that your objective sense of financial well-being and your financial ambition are not primarily driven by your absolute income. They are driven by the income of the people around you. This isn't a soft psychological finding, it is a measurable, replicable economic phenomena. What the people in your immediate environment earn doesn't just affect how you feel, it determines what you believe is achievable. It sets your reference point for what is normal. Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler extended this insight into a landmark 2007 study published in New England Journal of Medicine. Admittedly focused on health behaviors, but the mechanism is identical, showing that behaviors, habits, and standards spread through social networks in what they called a 3-degree of influence effect. Your behavior is influenced by the people you spend time with, who are influenced by the people they spend time with, who are influenced by the people they spend time with. The room you are in doesn't just affect you directly, it affects the entire network of influence shaping your decisions. What this means in practice is something most people never consciously choose. The conversation that feel normal to you, the financial goals that feel ambitious versus ridiculous, the lifestyle that feels like success, all of these are calibrated not by your own internal compass, but by the social environment you inhabit most frequently. In most rooms, owning a small business is something other people do. In another room, not owning one is thing that needs explaining. Neither room contains a truth, they contains a norm, and the norms are enormously powerful because they operate below the level of conscious decision making. I spent the early part of my career in environments where financial ambitions was frankly considered slightly embarrassing, where talking about wealth was seen as grass, where the polite thing was to be quietly comfortable and not push too hard. And I absorbed that norm completely without realizing I was absorbing it. It took deliberately entering different rooms, different professional environments, different conversations, different peer groups to understand that my ceiling wasn't set by my ability or my opportunities, it was set by the expectations of the room I was spending the most time in. The rule: you need to be intentional about the rooms you enter, not to abandon the people who matter to you, but to expand the range of environments that shape your standard. A conference, a mastermind group, a mentor relationship, a community of people who are building the things you want to build. You don't need to feel uncomfortable in those rooms immediately. In fact, discomfort is the signal that room is doing its job. It means the standard is above where you currently are. Stay anyway. Give it time. Watch what happens to your definition of possible. Here is what I want you to do right now. Before you watch anything else, drop a comment below telling me which of these 6 rules hit you the hardest. And more importantly, why? Not just the number, the reason. Because that reason is probably where your real financial work is sitting right now. And if this video gave you something genuinely useful, share it with one person in your life who needs to hear it. Not a mass share, one person. That's how this conversation grows. Subscribe if you're not already here and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. This is Mr. Financial Mindset. I'm Muzaffar Teja, reminding you, you weren't born to pay bills and die. You were born to build, to own your time, your decision, and your financial future. I'll see you in the next one.